The afternoon sun hung low over Beverly Hills, casting long shadows across palm-lined streets as a pickup truck rolled quietly into the circular driveway of the Meridian Grand Hotel. It wasn't flashy, no polished sports car, no tinted windows, just an old, well-kept truck, driven by a man who looked like he had nowhere to prove anything to anyone. That man was Clint Eastwood. At 90 years old, Clint had learned something most people never do. Attention was optional. Appearances were negotiable. Respect, however, was non-negotiable. He dressed for comfort now. Jeans, a simple button-down, shoes that had seen miles of quiet walks and long days, the kind of clothes worn by someone who valued purpose over perception. Morning arrived softly in Beverly Hills. Sunlight spilled through the sheer curtains of room 412, casting long, pale lines across the carpet. Clint Eastwood woke before his alarm, as he often did. Years of early call times and disciplined routines had trained his body better than any clock. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, listening. The city outside was already awake. Cars moving like distant waves. A faint siren somewhere far enough away not to demand attention. It was a familiar soundscape, comforting in its predictability. He stood, stretched, and walked to the window again. From this height, the Meridian Grand looked peaceful, elegant, controlled. It gave no hint of the tension that had rippled through its lobby the night before. Buildings rarely remembered moments like that. People did. Downstairs, Ashley Reynolds arrived early for her shift. Too early. She stood outside the staff entrance for a full minute before swiping her badge, inhaling deeply as if bracing herself for impact. Her eyes were puffy from a night of little sleep. She hadn't cried much after she got home, but she hadn't rested either. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. The way the room had gone quiet. The way the man had looked at her. Not angry, not smug, just disappointed, as if she'd failed a test she didn't know she was taking. She stepped inside. The lobby was quieter than usual at this hour, a few early checkouts, the faint clink of porcelain from the breakfast setup. Everything felt louder to her now. Every footstep, every word. David Chen was already at the desk. "Good morning," he said, nodding to her. "Good morning," Ashley replied, her voice steadier than she felt. He studied her briefly. "You okay?" She nodded. "I will be." "That's all I need to hear," he said. Ashley took her position behind the desk, hands resting lightly on the marble. She noticed things she hadn't before. The nervous energy of a guest fumbling for their credit card. The tired patience of a woman traveling alone with 2 children. The way people looked relieved when someone simply smiled at them. She smiled, more that morning than she ever had. Around 9:30 a.m., a black sedan pulled up to the entrance. The valet straightened immediately. Ashley saw it through the glass and felt her stomach tighten. Not with fear, but with anticipation. She didn't know why. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was memory. The door opened. Clint stepped out. He wore a different jacket today, still understated, still practical. No attempt at disguise. No need. He walked with the same unhurried confidence, the kind that didn't need recognition to exist. Ashley froze for half a second. Then she moved. She stepped out from behind the desk before he reached it. "Good morning, Mr. Eastwood," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Clint stopped, surprised. Not by the recognition, but by the tone. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't performative. It was simply respectful. "Good morning," he replied. "I wanted to apologize again," Ashley said. Not because of who you are, but because of how I treated you. Clint studied her face. I believed you last night, he said calmly. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. I hope you have a good stay, she added. I already am, he said, and walked past her toward the exit. Ashley watched him go, a quiet sense of relief settling in her chest. Later that morning, in a private dining room off the main restaurant, David Chen sat with two senior executives from the hotel's parent company. They hadn't come because of a complaint. They'd come because of a call. Clint Eastwood stayed here last night, one of them said, scrolling through his phone. And there was an incident. David nodded. I'm aware. The executive raised an eyebrow. He didn't complain. No, David said. He didn't. That's not what concerns us, the other executive said. It's that 5 different guests posted about it online this morning. David remained calm. And every one of them praised him, the executive replied. Not us. Him. David smiled faintly. That doesn't surprise me. The first executive leaned back. He made us look small without saying a word. David folded his hands. No. He made us look human. They were quiet for a moment. Finally, the executive nodded. Handle it internally. Training. Policy reminders. No PR spin. Already in motion, David said. As they stood to leave, one of them paused. You know, he could have destroyed us. David nodded. He chose not to. That afternoon, Clint sat in a quiet cafe a few blocks from the hotel, sipping coffee and reading notes for an upcoming meeting. A man at the next table kept glancing over. Finally, he leaned closer. Excuse me, are you? Clint looked up. The man stopped mid-sentence, suddenly uncertain. Yes, Clint said gently. I am, the man smiled, embarrassed. Just wanted to say, I heard about what happened at the hotel. Clint raised an eyebrow. You did? Yeah, the man said. My sister was there. She said you handled it with class. Clint nodded once. Thank you. The man hesitated. Can I ask, why didn't you say anything sooner? Clint thought about it. Because, he said, most people aren't bad. They're just afraid of making mistakes. The man nodded slowly, as if filing the words away. Back at the Meridian Grand, Ashley ended her shift exhausted, but lighter. She knew she'd be thinking about that moment for a long time. Not because she'd been humiliated, but because she'd been corrected. Quietly, firmly, and with grace. And somewhere in the city, Clint Eastwood moved on to his next meeting, his next story, carrying with him the same truth he always had. Real power doesn't announce itself. It waits, it watches, and when it speaks, everyone listens. He parked, shut off the engine, and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. 2 days of meetings awaited him. Studio discussions, script revisions, conversations about a film that might or might not be his last. He didn't think about legacy much anymore. Work was just work. Life was quieter now. The Meridian Grand rose before him like something out of Europe. Arched windows, marble columns, a facade meant to impress. Clint had stayed there dozens of times over the past 2 decades, enough that the bellman once joked he should have his own key. Today, though, no one recognized him. Inside, the lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Velvet chairs were arranged in deliberate symmetry. Soft, classical music floated through the air. It was the kind of place where people spoke quietly, where wealth didn't shout. It whispered. Behind the front desk stood Ashley Reynolds. 26 years old, 8 months on the job. Ashley had come to Los Angeles chasing auditions and callbacks, living between hope and rejection. The Meridian Grand paid the bills. It was temporary. That's what she told herself. Her manager had been clear during training. This hotel serves a certain clientele, people with expectations, with money. Part of your job is making sure guests understand what they're getting into. Ashley took that seriously. So when the automatic doors slid open and an elderly man in jeans walked in alone, she made a decision in less than 3 seconds. Probably confused. Maybe someone's grandfather. Definitely not the usual crowd. Clint approached the bare desk calmly, placing his driver's license and credit card down with practiced ease. "Checking in," he said. "Reservation under Eastwood." Ashley smiled politely and typed the name into her computer. The reservation appeared instantly. 2 nights. Standard room. Confirmed. Everything was in order. And yet, she hesitated. She looked up at Clint again. Took in the casual clothes, the old truck keys in his hand. No entourage, no air of importance. Her training echoed in her mind. "Mr. Eastwood," she began, her voice careful, professional. "Before we proceed, I should inform you that this is a luxury property. Our standard rooms are quite expensive." Clint raised an eyebrow slightly. "How expensive?" "Our standard rooms start at $450 per night. That doesn't include taxes or fees. I just want to make sure there are no surprises." Around them, the lobby continued its quiet rhythm. A man checked his phone near the concierge desk. A couple waited for the elevator. No one was listening yet. "I made the reservation online," Clint replied evenly. The rate was listed. "Yes, of course," Ashley said quickly, but she pressed on. "Sometimes online bookings can be confusing. With taxes and fees, your 2-night stay will be over $1,000. Are you sure you'd like to proceed?" Clint slid his credit card a little closer to her. "I'd like to check in." Ashley hesitated again. She told herself she was being helpful, transparent, responsible. "There are some very nice hotels nearby," she added gently. "More affordable options. A Holiday Inn about 2 miles away. That might be a better fit." That was when a man, sitting nearby, looked up from his phone. A woman near the elevator turned her head. The temperature in the room shifted. Clint studied Ashley, not with anger, not even irritation, but with something quieter. Curiosity. Amusement, maybe. "What makes you think I need a better fit?" he asked. Ashley felt the moment slipping but didn't know how to stop. "I'm just trying to help, sir. We've had situations where guests didn't realize the cost until checkout. I don't want that to happen to you." "You think I can't afford to stay here?" Clint said. "It wasn't a question," Ashley replied quickly, then froze, realizing what she'd said. The silence grew thicker. People were openly watching now. Conversations had stalled. Even the concierge had stopped moving. Clint didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his expression. "Check me in," he said. "I understand the rate. I have a reservation." Ashley's hands trembled slightly as she picked up his license and entered his name again, this time completing the check-in process. She pressed Enter, and then the screen changed. Her face drained of color. Highlighted in bold letters were words she'd never seen before. IP Gold Elite Member. Since 2001 Lifetime Stays, 127 Ownership Group Investor. Notify GM immediately. Ashley stopped breathing. From the back office, a soft chime sounded on another computer. The general manager had just been alerted, and the entire lobby was about to fall completely, devastatingly silent. The silence didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like a fog rolling across the lobby floor, swallowing every stray sound as it moved. The soft music overhead seemed suddenly louder. The tap of keys at the desk stopped. Somewhere near the elevator, a woman froze mid-step. Ashley Reynolds stared at her screen as if it had betrayed her. She read the words again, and then again. VIP Gold Elite Member. Since 2001, lifetime stays, 127 ownership group investor. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked up at the man standing calmly across from her. The same man she had just advised to stay at a Holiday Inn. He hadn't changed posture, hadn't smirked, hadn't said, "I told you so." He simply waited. Behind the scenes, the Meridian Grand's internal system did what it was designed to do. The moment Ashley completed the check-in, an automatic alert flashed on another screen. This one inside the general manager's office. David Chen had been reviewing staff schedules when he heard the distinctive chime. He looked at the notification. Eastwood. Clint, check-in in progress. David frowned. He hadn't been informed Clint was arriving today. Normally, he liked to greet him personally. Clint wasn't just a frequent guest. He was an investor. Someone who had believed in the hotel when it was still an idea on paper. David clicked over to the security camera feed. What he saw made his stomach drop. Ashley was frozen behind the desk. Clint stood in front of her, calm as stone, and scattered throughout the lobby were at least 15 people, every one of them watching. David didn't walk. He ran. Back at the front desk, Ashley felt every second stretch longer than the last. She finally managed to whisper, "Mr. Eastwood." Clint met her eyes. There was no triumph in his expression, just patience. "Yes," he said. Before she could speak again, footsteps approached quickly from behind. "Mr. Eastwood!" David's voice cut through the silence, breathless but controlled. "Welcome back. I didn't realize you were checking in today. I would have come to greet you personally." The words landed like a dropped plate. Every head in the lobby turned. Ashley felt her knees weaken. David extended his hand, but Clint gestured lightly toward the desk clerk instead. "Your clerk here was concerned I might not be able to afford the hotel," Clint said evenly. David blinked. "Once. Twice." "I'm sorry. What?" "She suggested a Holiday Inn might be a better fit for me." The temperature in the room plummeted. David turned slowly to Ashley. "Ashley," he said, his voice now razor-thin. "Did you suggest that Mr. Eastwood, one of our most valued guests and an investor in this hotel, stay somewhere else?" Ashley couldn't speak. Her face burned. Tears pooled in her eyes. She clutched Clint's driver's license like it was evidence at a trial. Before David could continue, Clint raised a hand. "She was doing what she thought was her job," he said. "Managing expectations. By judging guests based on appearance," David replied quietly. "It wasn't a question," Clint corrected. The words echoed. David inhaled slowly and turned to address the lobby. Everyone was watching now. No one pretended otherwise. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I apologize that you've had to witness this. What happened here represents a failure of our training and our values. Every guest deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of how they're dressed." He turned back to Ashley. "Please step away from the desk. We'll discuss this in my office." Ashley took a step back, tears spilling freely now. Another clerk hurried forward to take over, but Clint stopped them. "David," he said calmly, "I don't think that's necessary." David hesitated. "She made assumptions," Clint continued. "Yes, but she didn't act with malice. She acted with misguided helpfulness." Ashley looked up at him, stunned. You assumed I couldn't afford to stay here because I'm an old man in casual clothes, Clint said gently. That's a mistake, but it's a correctable one, if you learn from it. Ashley's voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I didn't recognize you. I thought, say it, Clint said. Softly, she swallowed. I thought you couldn't afford it. Don't apologize for thinking it, Clint replied. Apologize for acting on it. The lobby remained utterly silent. Everyone makes assumptions, Clint continued. The question is whether you let those assumptions determine how you treat people. He picked up his credit card and license. Now, I've had a long drive, he said. I'm tired, and I'd like to check into my room. The other clerk completed the process in seconds, hands shaking. Room 412, he said quietly. Top floor. Corner room. Clint took the key card and nodded once. As he walked toward the elevator, the silence followed him. Only when the doors closed did the lobby slowly breathe again. And behind that desk, Ashley Reynolds understood something she would never forget. This wasn't about money. It was about judgment. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft chime, sealing Clint away from the lobby and its collective breath. Inside the mirrored box, he stood alone, holding his overnight bag, the faint hum of the elevator the only sound. He exhaled slowly. Moments like that always lingered longer than they should, not because they were dramatic, but because they revealed something uncomfortable about people, about how quickly assumptions formed, about how easily dignity could be misplaced. The elevator climbed. Back in the lobby, the silence fractured in fragments. A whisper here, a shifting foot there. Someone cleared their throat. Conversations restarted cautiously, as if volume itself needed permission. Ashley stood a few feet away from the desk now, her back to the marble wall, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Tears streaked her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She barely noticed them. Her mind replayed the last 10 minutes on a loop. Every word she'd chosen, every look she'd misread, every assumption she'd treated like fact. David Chen turned to her. Office, he said quietly. She nodded, legs trembling, and followed him down the hallway that led past the concierge desk and into the staff-only corridor. The door to his office closed behind them with a final click that sounded louder than it should have. Ashley stood in front of his desk, eyes fixed on the floor. I know what you're thinking, David said after a moment. You think you're fired, she nodded again. I understand if I am. David didn't respond immediately. He walked around his desk and leaned against it, arms crossed. What you did today, he said, choosing each word carefully, was wrong. Ashley flinched. But, he continued, what matters just as much is why you did it. She looked up. You weren't trying to humiliate him, David said. You weren't trying to be cruel. You were trying to prevent a problem. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. Ashley's voice came out small. I judged him. Yes, David said. You judged him by his clothes, his age, his car. She nodded again. That's called implicit bias, David went on, and it doesn't disappear just because we don't want it to exist. She wiped her eyes now. I don't ever want to make someone feel that way again. David studied her for a long moment. You're not fired, he said finally. Ashley's breath caught. You are on probation, he added. And you're going to undergo additional training. If this happens again, even once, you're done. I understand, she said quickly. Thank you, David nodded. You got lucky today. Not because of who he is, but because of who he chose to be. Ashley knew exactly what he meant. Upstairs, Clint unlocked the door to room 412 and stepped inside. The corner suite was quiet, bathed in soft evening light. He set his bag down and stood at the window, looking out over Beverly Hills as the city eased into night. He thought about Ashley, about how close she'd come to a moment that could have ended her job, maybe her confidence, maybe her future. He'd seen that kind of fear before. He'd also seen what kindness, measured, deliberate kindness, could do. His phone buzzed, a message from a producer. Another meeting confirmed. Another conversation about another film. He put the phone face down. Downstairs, the Meridian Grand returned to its rhythm. Guests checked in. Luggage rolled across marble. Life went on. But for 15 people in that lobby, something had shifted. They talked about it in low voices, about the calm way he'd handled it, about the way the room had gone silent, about how wrong it had felt, and how right the resolution had been. One man shook his head. "I would have lost it." A woman replied, "He taught everyone a lesson," without raising his voice. By morning, a few of them would post about it online, not naming names, just telling the story, a quiet story about dignity. And somewhere behind the desk, Ashley Reynolds would stand a little straighter, speak a little more carefully, and remember the day she learned that respect isn't something you ration. It's something you give. That evening, the Meridian Grand looked the same as it always had. Crystal lights glowed softly. Shoes whispered across polished marble. The hotel moved with its usual rhythm, measured, refined, unbothered. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Stories do that. They don't shatter buildings. They change people. On the 6th floor, David Chen stood alone in the hallway outside a conference room, reading a printed memo for the third time. It outlined new staff training procedures, implicit bias awareness, guest interaction protocols, language guidelines. Necessary. Overdue. But it wasn't policy that weighed on him. It was responsibility. He'd worked in hospitality for 25 years. He'd seen guests scream at clerks over towel counts. He'd seen entitlement disguised as importance. He thought he understood dignity. Then one quiet man in denim had reminded him what it actually looked like. In room 412, Clint Eastwood finished his call and set his phone down. The meeting had gone well. Financing secured. Timeline approved. Another project moving forward. Another film that would eventually belong to the world instead of him. He stood by the window again, watching dusk swallow the city. He thought briefly about the lobby, about Ashley, about how close irritation had come and how easily it could have turned into something else. A complaint, a demand, a phone call that ruined a career before it began. He didn't regret his choice. Regret, he'd learned, came from power misused, not power restrained. Downstairs, Ashley sat in the break room, with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Across from her, another clerk leaned forward. "I heard he's an owner." Ashley nodded. "Partial investor." "That's insane," the clerk said. "I would have died on the spot." Ashley shook her head. "No, you wouldn't have. You'd have learned." She stood, poured the tea down the sink, and returned to the desk. That night, she treated every guest the same way. Not politely, not carefully, respectfully. At 8:17 p.m., a couple checked in wearing designer clothes and impatience. At 8:24, a tired man in construction boots asked for a room. Ashley smiled at both. No calculations. No assumptions. Just service. "Cross the lobby," two guests whispered. "That's him," one said quietly. The other nodded. "I heard he owns this place." They watched Clint cross the lobby, unnoticed by most, acknowledged by none. He didn't slow. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. Later that night, David reviewed guest feedback. One comment stood out. They watched something uncomfortable happen in your lobby. What impressed me wasn't the mistake. It was how it was handled. That told me everything about this hotel. David closed the file and leaned back. Mistakes were inevitable. Responses were not. Clint checked out the next morning. No fuss, no announcement, no special treatment. Ashley handed him the receipt. "Thank you for staying with us, Mr. Eastwood." He nodded. "Thank you for doing your job." That was all. Years later, when Ashley finally landed her first real acting role, an interviewer asked her about the moment that changed her. She didn't mention fame. She didn't mention ownership. She said this: "I learned that respect isn't about who someone is. It's about who you decide to be." The Meridian Grand still stands. Guests still arrive dressed in everything from suits to sweatshirts. Some rich, some struggling, some important, some invisible. But one thing is different. Every person who walks through those doors is greeted the same way, not because of a rule, because of a lesson.